Welcome to Early Career Strategies for Successful Planning Practice. My name is Rick Wilson. I'm a professor of urban and regional planning at Cal Poly Pomona in Southern California. I'm excited that you're joining us for this class, which is designed to provide assistance, ways of looking at things, processes for dealing with the issues that arise in early career practice for urban and regional planners. The plan for the course is to first address the gap between planning theory and practice that you experience when you go from school to practice. So I'm trying to bring that gap closer together and close it if I can. I have a framework for understanding practice, for understanding what is happening in a practice episode, and I will present that. I have some ideas about a practice style I call principled adaptability, and I'll demonstrate that to you. A big part of planning practice is ethical reasoning, so I'll introduce some relatively easy to use concepts to think through questions for which there is not one clear-cut answer, but perhaps multiple answers, and you're trying to choose between them. Often planners think they know the right answer, and so there's a section on being right. How do you know if you're really right, and right about what, and what to do when you're in that situation? The next section is on avoiding wrong, how to avoid ethical missteps that planners inevitably make. So I'll introduce a process for thinking about ethical choices. Finally, planners don't work alone, so the aspect of navigating managers, organizations, and teams is very significant in our profession, and I'll give you some ideas on how to make that as smooth as possible. And finally, we'll put the pieces together and hopefully help you address the issues you may be facing in practice. So planning practice is different than other professions in my contention. We work for the public interest, but the public interest is contested. It's not defined, for example, in the AICP Code of Ethics. So our profession obligates us to think about what, in fact, our definition of the public interest is. Our professional definition is more vague than other professions because there's so many different things that planners do, and we synthesize across other disciplines. We're advisors, not deciders, so we have issues to consider in convincing elected officials and members of the community to follow our recommendations. And what we do affects land value, so it brings to bear powerful interests seeking to maximize their well-being. The final and perhaps most radical thing about planning practice is that planning can do harm. We normally think of our work as doing good in the world, but for example, strategies that planners would use to bring art to a community as part of a local economic development idea may now be considered having a gentrifying effect and therefore a bad thing. So we live in a contested terrain, and we need to be able to reason our way through good choices in that contested terrain. I mentioned I teach at Cal Poly Pomona. I've been there for quite some time. I started my planning career as a practitioner in Canada, and I also practiced planning in California, mostly in transportation planning, and I work as a consultant for cities and developers and transit agencies as well. My research is on parking reform and transit-oriented development. This course is based on the second half of my book, A Guide for the Idealist, which addresses these issues and also launching your career. And I also note that I have a blog series on the APA website if you're interested in looking at that. So that's me. Now I'd like to turn to you and start the course.